Hi, I'm Dalton Durant. I'm going to be talking about my top 10 albums of 2020. So let's just hop right into it. Basically, this year, 2020 has been pretty crappy. I think everybody knows that. But despite that, I still think we had some good music come out. Alright, so to be clear about my list, it's a hip hop list. Not every project on this list is considered an album, but there was just some projects that came out this year that were so good, in my opinion, that they had to be on my list. So my list is just my favorites. It's not saying that these are the best. It's just saying that these were my favorites. These are the ones that stuck out most to me. On the subject of whether they're an EP or an album, if they're really short, I didn't put them on this list because there are projects that came out this year that are like 5 tracks. You got somebody like J. Cole. He dropped a singles pack with just 2 songs, so stuff like that's not going to be on my list, of course. For the most part, everything on here was a legit project. So at number 10, I got Dark Lane Demo Tapes by Drake. This came out earlier in the year. I know it's not technically an album, but Drake's one of those artists for me that most of the stuff he puts out, I always tend to like. I've hated on Drake in the past for the music he's put out, but at the end of the day, I can't hate on him. I think the whole vibe of this project just really stuck out to me. It's not one of his best projects, but I think in my opinion, I think it was better than Scorpion. I can actually listen to this front to back. I can't listen to Scorpion front to back. Honestly, to this point, I've still never listened to the second half of Scorpion. I just can't do it. But yeah, there's nothing really much to say about this project, but I just like it, it's Drake. At number 9, I got Circles by Mac Miller. This came out, I think, in January. This came out before I even moved to my apartment. There's a lot of hype behind this being the one and only album coming out after his death. I only listened to it one time when it came out, and I was like half asleep when I listened to it. I didn't actually listen to it again until a couple weeks ago. It's just one of those albums that just really hits you right here. When you listen to it, you're like, damn, I miss Mac Miller. The subject matter he was talking about on the album, it makes you wonder where Mac Miller's head would be at during a time like this, and it just makes you even more sad. But I think it was a great project. I think it was very well handled compared to a lot of other albums that have came out after an artist's death. Somebody like X, I think the albums that came out after his death were handled poorly. They were trash. Juice WRLD, actually, he had an album come out this year too after his death. It was alright, but I already know they were going to put another project out by him, and they've been putting out singles by him with other artists that never even worked with him while he was still alive, so I don't know. I just think it's kind of whack. So at number 8, we got Limbo by Amine. Amine is one of my favorite artists. I think he's pretty slept on. For Limbo, there's just a good chunk of tracks that are just back-to-back bangers for me. But yeah, I think Limbo is one of the most slept on projects of the year. I don't feel like enough people talk about it, and I think it was really good. It had good features on it with, Jid, Young Thug. I think it's a good front to back listen. At number 7, I got Eternal Take by Lil Uzi. This, I know for sure this came out before the pandemic started, and I remember it coming out and just thinking that this year was going to be really fun, and this was going to be one of those albums that were going to be the soundtracks of the year. Literally a couple weeks later, that's when the pandemic started. I remember listening to it, I remember thinking to myself, this was well worth the wait. There was so much hype behind this album. And that's the thing about this year. I feel like a lot of albums came out this year with a lot of hype behind them. Some of them performed well, some of them didn't perform well. And this was one of those albums, in my opinion, I think performed well and it lived up to the hype. I think he really set the standards for deluxe albums when a week later he basically put out another album attached to this with Lil Uzi vs. the World 2. That's what it's technically called, I guess. Even that was a good project within itself. But I'm only counting the 18-track Eternal Take on this list, which was really good by itself. Only had one feature. I think Lil Uzi definitely shined on it. A lot of standout tracks on it. My favorite tracks on it would have to be Lo Mein, Pop, I'm Sorry, Prices with the Travis Scott sample in it. That one hit. Then you had P2, which was a sequel to XO Tour Life, which was totally unexpected. The instrumental sounded pretty identical to the original, but it was a good track that stood on its own compared to the original, and I liked it. So the project as a whole really lived up to the hype. I still listen to it. It's probably one of my most listened to albums of the year. At number 6, we have Don Toliver with Heaven or Hell. Now, when I first listened to this, I didn't think anything of it. I listened to the whole thing, and it had nothing to take away from it. I still don't really have that much to take away from it, besides it just being a good project after listening to it a couple more times later in the year. With Don Toliver being from Houston, it's really cool to see an artist from Houston be brought up by Travis Scott under his label. After going back and listening to this a couple more times, I realized that it was a pretty good project, and it made me more hyped for the future of his career. So prior to this album coming out, I really think he stood out the most on the Jack Boys tape. And so that's what made me kind of hyped for this album. It just took me a couple listens. That's what it is about albums for me. I hate going into an album with a lot of expectations. That brings me to my next album on my list, which is Man on the Moon 3. I am probably one of the biggest Kid Cudi fans. I ride for Kid Cudi, but I've also been the most critical of Kid Cudi in the past. But for me, for this project, I really wanted to go into this project with an open mind. I knew that it wasn't going to be a Man on the Moon 1 or a Man on the Moon 2. With Man on the Moon 1 and Man on the Moon 2, those are projects that really stand up high on my list, and I'm sure it stands high on a lot of people's list. So I didn't want to go in expecting to hear those albums. I think anybody that really listens to music isn't going to go into a sequel having those expectations. So I just wanted to listen to it for what it was. It took me a couple listens. I honestly listened to it this past month the most out of any other album. I think the production on it was really good compared to his previous albums. You can tell he went more in a rapping route, and it was really cool to see Kid Cudi rap more on an album, because in the past I've seen him go more into the rock, grunge. I think a lot of people complain about this album, him sounding a lot like Travis Scott. And yeah, I think he did sound like Travis Scott a lot, but honestly, if you really think about it, Travis Scott sounds like Kid Cudi a lot. And you can tell that's where he was influenced. So I'm pretty sure Travis Scott had something to do with this album, one way or another. I'm pretty sure he influenced it. I think they're working on the album together, from what I do believe. And I think that kind of influenced this album a little bit. But I think overall the project was really good. It definitely passed in my book. I've been waiting for a Man on the Moon 3 for so long. Ever since the days where he was, when he put out Indica, I thought that was going to be a Man on the Moon 3. But it wasn't. And after a while, I didn't think Man on the Moon 3 would ever come out. But it did. And it was out of nowhere. And it was honestly the highlight of my year. Tracks like Tequila Shots, Mr. Solo Dolo 3, which I think all his Solo Dolo tracks have been well produced, well executed, and they all kind of play a role with each other. Yeah, and they kind of all have that same type of vibe. Like when I was listening to it, I didn't even look at the name of the track and I knew it was Solo Dolo 3. I think Solo Dolo 3 is my favorite track on this album. But also tracks like Elsie's Baby Boy, that really grew on me. I think that was the most rock influenced song on this album, but I think it fit in well with it. But then like a track like The Void, that song just puts me in a good mood. I love that song. And then Rockstar Nights, I was really skeptical about that song. It featuring Trippie Redd. I thought that was a weird feature for this album, but with them both being from Ohio, Kid Cudi and Trippie Redd, it made sense. But I was a little nervous about it because Trippie Redd put out an album this year, which I'll talk about that. Maybe it'll be on my list, maybe it won't. Yeah, I think Trippie Redd performed well on that song. And then also the Pop Smoke feature. I was like, what? Like when I saw that. But it grew on me after a couple listens. And yeah, I like that track. So yeah, I think overall, I wanted to put this album higher on my list. I think at number 5, it's a solid one on my list. So now, that brings me to my number 4 spot, and that's New Beginnings by Reason. If you know me, you know how much I love TDE. And this being the only TDE release of the year that's probably why I put it so high on my list. If Kendrick put out an album, or Isaiah Rashad, or even Ab-Soul put out an album, this might not even be on my list. Not to say it's not a good album, but I've been waiting for a release by one of those three artists that I just mentioned for so long, it seems like. I know Isaiah Rashad, from what I hear, has an album done. Same with Ab-Soul and same with Kendrick. I know they all have albums. It's just a matter of time before they release them. And I see a lot of people complain about it, and I've made a video about this in the past talking about TDE. But you also got to realize with the way this year is gone, a lot of people like them don't want to put out music because they rely so heavily on shows, and that's their biggest promotion towards their albums. Even though people have criticized the way they promote their albums and all that, but I don't know. I think TDE is still one of the best labels in the game, and I think New Beginnings by Reason just stands true to that. And I really liked how he brought a lot of people from TDE on this album. We had Isaiah Rashad. It's the first time hearing a verse from Isaiah Rashad in so long. Before this verse, the last time I heard him on a verse was on SZA's album, which that's another person that needs to put out an album that I've been waiting for a long time. But that was in 2017. But yeah, it was just really refreshing. And then we also had the songs with Schoolboy Q, Ab-Soul, and then we even got some Kendrick ad-libs on there. Didn't get a verse from him, which was kind of disappointing, but it's whatever. Yeah, so with Reason, he doesn't really stand out as an artist to me, especially with him being on TDE. I think he's more the weaker links on that label, but at the same time, he could rap. New Beginnings was a good album. I put it high on my list. I didn't see this album on anybody else's list, but you know, like I said, me being the fan I am of TDE, I had to put it on this list. So at number 3, this is another album I honestly thought I was going to have number 1 at the time it came out. But it ended up being number 3. So we have Savage Mode 2 by 21 Savage and Metro Boomin. So this isn't like any other album that came out this year where it took me a couple listens to actually, you know, for me to like it and for it to grow on me. Instantly when I heard that Morgan Freeman intro and then the second track came on, boy, come on now. First of all, I never thought I'd see Morgan Freeman narrating a 21 Savage album. But for this being a sequel to the original Savage Mode, that's a plus within itself. But then you also, for me, I've noticed the growth in 21 Savage as an artist. That was apparent to me when he dropped I Am, I Was back in 2018. And he also has had a lot of good features since then. And ever since then, I was looking forward to another project from him. And when I found out this album was coming out, I was hyped for it. And it really lived up to the hype. I think it's a well-balanced album. The production on it is super good. Metro Boomin, this is why he's one of my favorite producers in the game right now. The way he produced this album, it reminds me of a slasher film. Like all the beats on it remind me of something straight out of a slasher film, and it paints this horrific picture in my mind while I'm listening to it, but I love it. And I can't get enough of it. Especially on the songs like Mini Man, that beat, oh my god. And then the features were pretty solid on this. We had features from Drake. I like that feature. The Young Thug track, which is right after that song, that one bangs. The way Young Thug comes in on that song, I love it. This was a well put together album. I can listen to it pretty much no skips. I think there's probably one song on it that I'm not too fond of, but other than that, well produced. 21 Savage definitely stands out on there. I love his bars on it. His bars are funny, but they're also menacing at the same time, and that's what I love about 21 Savage. He's just such a character to me. But yeah, number 3 for sure is Savage Mode 2. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my honorable mentions out the way now, because these top 2 picks were really hard to choose between. One of them would be Fuck the World by Brent Faiyaz. That being the only R&B influence album on here. That's why at the beginning of this video I said this is mainly a rap list, but I still consider somebody like Brent Faiyaz to be in the hip-hop realm. So I almost considered putting it on here because it was a good project, but I think as a whole that project doesn't really fit the criteria I want for this list. There's also Deontay Hitchcock with Better. I think he is still on the rise as an artist. I've known him since about 2014. I remember being shown a track by him on SoundCloud that I would always listen to. Last year, it was really cool to see him on the Revenge of the Dreamers album. And then after that, I was just wondering where he'd go from there. And he put out his album this year, and it was actually pretty good. But as a whole, it doesn't really make that cut. Well, another album that I want to mention is Black Habits by D Smoke. I didn't know who D Smoke was until this year. I finally watched Rhythm and Flow on Netflix. I mean, he stood out the most. That's why he won the competition. And I really liked him. He could speak Spanish too. Like, that was dope. I'm not too crazy about the Spanish on the songs, but yeah, he could rap. And I didn't know he was Sir's brother, which that made it even more cool, you know, with Sir being on TDE. The project he put out was pretty solid. I liked it, and it almost made this list. It was pretty close to making this list. My last honorable mention, which this album was the closest to making this list, but I switched it out with the Drake Dark Lane demo tapes, was 3:15:20 by Childish Gambino. In the future, I'll probably wish I would have put this on there, on the list, but there's a lot of low moments on this album for me. I think some of the tracks kind of just drag on a little too long for me to really feel comfortable putting it on my list, but overall, I think it was well put together. It was one of those projects that came out of nowhere. It's a very forgettable project because, one, the album cover is just a white square. It doesn't have a real name to it. All the tracks don't have real names to it. So I think those are elements that make it very forgettable. But at the same time, if you actually sit down and listen to this album, which I've done about a couple times this year, and I really liked it. But like I said, it does have its low moments where it's hard to finish it. But yeah, it's a great project overall. But I also want to talk about some of the most disappointing albums of the year. And then I also want to talk about albums I didn't care for, but I know that are good. I just don't care for them. Albums that disappointed me the most this year. First of all, we got to start with Whole Lotta Red by Playboi Carti. I couldn't even finish Whole Lotta Red. That's how terrible it was to me. The production on it was good, but the way Carti tried to rap on this, he tried to rap in a way that I've never seen anybody try to rap it. And I just don't think he nailed it the way he thought he did. And there was a lot of moments where I was listening to it and I was just like, what the fuck is this? It gave me a headache. It made me want to punch a hole in my wall, honestly. And not in a good way. There was only one track on here that stood out to me, and that was the one with Kanye West. I don't even remember the name of it. I don't even care about the names of any songs on this album because it was that bad. I wasn't necessarily hyped for it, but I know there was a lot of hype behind it to where I was like, yeah, I want to listen to this. I want to check it out, see what the hype's about. With somebody like Playboi Carti, I have no idea what he's going to put out. That shit was trash. There's a reason why people call it a whole lot of skips, and there's a reason why I couldn't finish it, and I'll probably never finish it. The next disappointing album on my list would be Pegasus by Trippie Redd. Now, Trippie Redd is one of those artists that I really like, and I try to defend, but I just can't defend this album. Don't get me wrong, there are some good tracks, a lot of good tracks on this album, but first of all, my biggest complaint with it is that it's too long. It's like 24 tracks. That's just way too long for an album, in my opinion. I think a good album is a solid, like, 12 to 16 songs. Even 16 is kind of pushing it, but 24? Nah, fam. If he would have cut it down and really kept all of the good songs that I liked, it would probably be on this list. And even before I made this list, I was thinking about putting it on my list, but it just isn't. It's just not that good. And Trippie Redd is one of those artists that I really think has a lot of potential, but I just don't think he's reached his potential yet. And it's kind of frustrating because he's been out for a while now. And I don't think he's really had, like, I think the closest thing he's had to a really good year was 2018. When he put out his debut album. And then he also put out A Love Letter to You 3. I think that was one of his best years. But he hasn't really grown from that, in my opinion. And I really hope that he can grow a little bit more and maybe reach his potential. But with this album, I don't know if he'll ever do that. Those are really my only two most disappointing albums this year. Everything else was kind of like on point. I also gotta give a shout out to Lil Baby with My Turn. I don't think the album itself is that great, and it really doesn't sound like a complete album to me. I don't think he's really had that album yet, but at the same time, I think he had the best year in hip hop as a rapper. He should have won awards, in my opinion. I think he's definitely in a good place in hip hop, and he could rap, which is what I respect about him. He definitely had some good subject matter on his album that I never thought he would have talked about. Shout out to Lil Baby. An album that I really didn't care about this year, and I know a lot of people are going to give me shit for this. I just got to be honest with y'all. After Hours by The Weeknd. I just couldn't get into it. I'm not saying it was a bad album though, because it's not a bad album. I can completely understand why people love that album. But for me, I just can't get into The Weeknd. I just can't. I like him, and there's definitely a lot of songs that he's been on with rappers that I like. It's hard for me to sit down and listen to a Weeknd album. Now, if somebody puts it on and we're just chilling, like, I've been in situations where The Weeknd's been on, and I'm like, damn, this shit hits. But me sitting down by myself in my room like I am right now listening to it, I can't do it. But I will say the production on it was really good. I did listen to the whole thing. I tried to like it. Blinding Lights was a really good song though. I do like that song. I've heard it on the radio a million times, but it's still a really good song. But yeah, the production on it was so good. The Weeknd's talented. He's really talented. Maybe one day he'll grow on me, and he'll grow on me as an artist in general, but I don't know. I can't put this on the list. And I can't act like I listened to it and really liked it. So y'all can give me shit for that, but it's whatever. So now I got two more on my list. I'm gonna get back to that now. So number 2, which is an album I literally listened to on Christmas Day. I know it was out for a long time. I was very late, very sleep on it. And number 2, we got Alfredo by Freddie Gibbs and The Alchemist. I was listening to it while I was building Legos with my little brother, and I kept catching myself distracted because how good it was. First of all, The Alchemist is one of the best producers in the game. Yeah, he's definitely top 3. Matched with Freddie Gibbs. I've always been infatuated by Freddie Gibbs' voice, but I've never actually listened to a whole project by him until I listened to Alfredo, because I knew there was a lot of hype behind this. Like, everybody was talking about it being one of the best albums of the year. So I finally gave it a chance last week, and I listened to it, and I understood why people loved it so much. And I've been listening to it nonstop since that day. Every day I've been listening to it. My favorite songs on this album for sure are Frank Lucas. The production on that song, man, that's so good. And then I also like the one with Tyler the Creator. That one was really good. And Baby Shit and Skinny Suge. Those songs definitely stand out the most to me. Also, the song with Rick Ross was really good. But yeah, this is a 10-song album. That's a solid number of tracks for an album. But yeah, I think Freddie Gibbs is I think he's one of the best in the game. Like, he's literally one of those people that are holding on to everything I love about rap, and he's keeping it alive. There's a lot of moments in this year where I was really sad because I felt like hip-hop is just heading in this direction where I'm not liking any music that comes out. This is the type of rap I like listening to. I think ever since 2016 hit and the new sound came, we saw a decrease in music like this. Other than J. Cole or even Drake to some degree, we haven't had somebody like Kendrick put out anything, or there's just artists that don't get appreciated enough too. You know, people like Danny Brown, Absol, Earl Sweatshirt. But that's the thing, this type of music doesn't come out every year. You know, we have artists that are putting music out every year, and it just feels so recycled. Even the deluxe album thing, you know, like I said, I think Lil Uzi pulled it off really good, but there are so many other artists that did it this year, and they had like 5 or 6 tracks to the album they put out literally a couple weeks ago. It all sounds the same, and that's what made this list so hard for me to make. Albums like this remind me that rap is still in a good place, and there's still room for artists like this to shine, and I'm glad a lot of people recognize this as a good album. I even bought it on vinyl too. This is the only vinyl I have from an album that came out this year. I have 2 on the way, but I don't think they're going to come in for a long time. I did order Man on the Moon 3, and I ordered Savage Mode 2 a long time ago. I should have had it by now, but it's not coming until February now, so I'm a little mad about that. At number 1, I have Unlocked by Denzel Curry and Kenny Beats. This is one of those projects that came out pre-pandemic. So in a way, it does bring good memories back in my head when I listen to it. And it's one of those projects I've listened to all year round. Yeah, when I first listened to it, I knew right away I loved it. It didn't take me too much listens to know that. I'm a huge Denzel Curry fan. I think he's one of the best out right now. I think it was really between that and Alfredo, it was kind of close. But at the end of the day, I'm just such a huge fan of Denzel Curry that it was easy to put this at number one. I knew at the beginning of this year this was going to be my favorite album. It was going to be hard for any project to match this. I don't think enough people appreciate Denzel Curry. But I think Denzel Curry is one of those artists that you have to understand him to like him. He has an aggressive style to his rapping, so I think that's why a lot of people can't listen to him. But for me, I love it. I hope he puts out more projects. I've heard that he's only going to put like maybe 2 more albums out and then he's done. But I hope that's not true because I think he's really talented. And with him to match up with somebody like Kenny Beats, who's also one of my favorite producers in the game, that was really tight. I loved it. And I hope they do more work in the future together. I almost didn't want to put it on this list, but I was just like, it's so good, I have to. And it ended up being number one when I really thought it out and all that. So yeah, that's my list. Like I said, that's just albums I liked. Not saying they're the best, but if you haven't checked out anything on this list, I suggest you go check it out. This year was kind of crappy, like I said. We still had a good amount of music to listen to, and I've really just been doing that a lot this year more than ever. I think a lot of people listen to a lot of these albums that I put on my list with these high expectations. They just blaze through it, already forming an opinion about it. My suggestion is that you just go into an album with a clear mind. Just take it for what it's for, you know? Something like Man on the Moon 3. I've heard a lot of people say good things about it, but I've also heard a lot of bad things about it too. Just take it for what it's for, you know? A lot of these albums, it takes a couple listens for it to really grow on you. And I know for a fact that a lot of people don't listen to music the way I listen to it. I spend a good chunk of my week listening to music. It's hard. I can't even watch TV because I just spend most of my time listening to music. I really try to like things. I try not to form negative opinions. A Whole Lot of Red sucked. I just want to put that out there again. I just hope other people can appreciate these albums like I did and give them a chance if they haven't already. I look forward to what's going to come out in 2021. I hope Kendrick puts out an album. If you know me, you know Isaiah Rashad. I'm going to say that in every video I talk about music. Isaiah Rashad is one of my favorite artists, and he needs to drop an album right now. Please put out an album, bro. Yeah, I just hope 2021 is a better year overall, and I hope we get better music because of that. And that's another thing about this year that I want to say. With music, it brings out a lot of emotions, in me at least. And it makes me think about those times where those albums came out. And every time I listen to certain albums, it brings me back to a certain place in my life. So it kind of does suck that these albums are going to bring me back in this place where this year was just so chaotic and all that. But at the same time, I'll be able to appreciate them like I can appreciate this year as a whole because it taught me a lot. This is my first time making a list. I know I didn't have very detailed things to say about these albums. That's something I'm going to get better at in the future. I don't normally talk to a camera. It's kind of hard for me sometimes, but I think I did alright. This is kind of straight off the dome. I am looking at my iPad right now, but I don't have any notes on it. I'm just looking at names of tracks in my list. I'm going to get better at this, but if you watch this whole video, I hope you liked it and give it a thumbs up. And I'm going to try to make more videos soon. That's my goal. That's been my goal for a long time. It's hard to be consistent with YouTube. So yeah, if you watch this, again, I appreciate it. Give it a thumbs up. And yeah.